Hey everyone, it's Taehyung. I've been sitting here for a while thinking about how to start this without sounding too dramatic or too heavy. I don't usually make videos like this. I don't usually sit down and talk for this long, but today feels different. My heart feels different. And I think it's finally time I open up about something I've been carrying around for years. Before I start, I just want to say thank you for clicking on this video. Wherever you're watching from, I hope you're comfortable, I hope you're safe, and I hope your day has been gentle with you. If not, then maybe this video can keep you company for a little while. I'm not here as an idol today, not as a celebrity or someone on stage. I'm just here as Taehyung, a person who grew up in Daegu, who dreamed big, worked hard, and somehow ended up in a life he still doesn't fully understand most days. My hands are shaking a bit. I don't know if it's the cold, or the memories, or just me being nervous. I guess it doesn't matter. I just want to be honest with you. That's why I turned the camera on. I've been traveling a lot these past few years. Different countries, different cities, different languages, different kinds of love. And something strange happened along the way. Something I didn't even realize at first. Every time the plane landed back in Korea, my chest felt heavy. Not bad, not painful, not negative, just heavy. Like I was returning to a house where the furniture had been moved while I was away. Like the hallway was the same, but the air inside it wasn't. It took me a long time to admit this even to myself, but here it is. Korea doesn't feel the same to me anymore. I know that sounds harsh. I know it probably shocks some of you. Some people will misunderstand. Some people already have. But I'm not saying I dislike Korea. I'm not saying I hate my home. I'm not saying I want to live forever. I'm just saying something changed. Or maybe I changed. Or maybe both. When I was younger, Korea was warmth. It was my grandmother's hands on my cheek, brushing dirt away after I played outside too long. It was the sound of cicadas in the countryside and the smell of summer rain hitting the ground like a soft drum. It was the laughter of my friends echoing down the school hallway. It was walking to the convenience store late at night with only 2 coins in my pocket. Korea was simple, familiar, comforting, but later, as the world began to watch me, Korea became something else. It became noise, pressure, expectations, eyes everywhere. Every step I took felt broadcasted, every smile analyzed, every silence misinterpreted. The same streets I used to walk freely started feeling like narrow paths with walls closing in. And I didn't realize how much it affected me until I spent more time abroad where no one knew my face, where I could breathe without thinking, where I didn't have to put armor on just to buy coffee. People often talk about fame like it's a blessing with no shadows, like it only brings light, success, applause, love. And yes, fame has given me more love than I can ever repay. But fame also changes the shape of the world around you. It changes the way people look at you. It changes the way you look at yourself. Sometimes when I'm in Korea, I feel like I'm standing in a room that used to be mine, but someone quietly repainted the walls when I wasn't looking. The colors are still pretty, but they aren't the colors I grew up with. I look around and think, is this still my home? Or am I just visiting a place I used to belong to? I've seen a lot of comments from people saying, Taehyung seems happier abroad, or he looks more free when he's in other countries. And the truth is, sometimes I am. Not because Korea is bad, but because outside of Korea, I get to disappear. I get to be just another stranger walking down the street. I get to take long breaths without wondering if someone is filming me from across the cafe. I get to laugh without worrying someone will twist the context. I get to be a version of myself that feels lighter. But there's another side to it too, a side even more complicated. When I'm away, I miss Korea. I miss speaking in my own rhythm, the one that feels natural in my mouth. I miss the food that tastes like childhood. I miss the silence of Korean mornings and the hum of Korean nights. I miss the memories that are tied to every corner of Seoul, every street in Daegu. I miss the people I love. So, how can a place be something you both miss deeply and feel distant from at the same time? That question has followed me for years. I don't want anyone to misunderstand what I'm saying today. This is not a political statement. It's not criticism. It's not drama. It's not me turning my back on anything. This is just me sharing a human feeling, the feeling of watching your world change faster than your heart can keep up, the feeling of returning to the same house but noticing the light doesn't fall the way it used to. I think a lot of you might understand this feeling too, in your own way. Maybe it happened when you moved out of your parents' home. Maybe when you returned to your childhood neighborhood after years away. Maybe when you saw old friends and realized everyone grew up without you. That strange mix of nostalgia, love, distance, and confusion. It's something universal. I'm not ashamed of it anymore. I used to be. I used to force myself to say, no, I feel totally fine. Korea is exactly the same, but the truth is, it's not, and neither am I. I've grown, I've been hurt, I've learned, I've healed, I've changed, and Korea, the Korea I knew as a boy, has changed too. And that's okay. But the point of this video isn't just to say Korea feels different, it's to finally explain why, to share the real reasons, the personal ones, the ones I've kept quiet about for too long. So let's talk about it. Let's talk about what happened. Let's talk about what I discovered abroad. Let's talk about the moments that broke me and the ones that rebuilt me. Let's talk about the love I received and the loneliness I hid. Let's talk about what home really means and how someone like me can lose it and find it again. Because this story, it goes deeper than most people realize. When I think about why Korea feels different to me now, I realize it didn't happen all at once. It wasn't a sudden shift, like waking up one morning and finding the whole world turned upside down. It was slow, quiet, gradual, like watching a river change shape over the years without ever noticing the exact moment the water carved a new path. I remember the first time I felt it. It was after a long trip abroad. I had been gone for weeks, maybe months. My schedule was crazy back then, filled with back to back flights, interviews, rehearsals, stages, cameras, everything happening so fast, I barely had time to breathe. But the strange thing is, even in that chaos, I felt free. I could walk down unfamiliar streets wearing a mask or a cap, and no one would stop. No one would stare too long. No one would whisper my name like a question. I could just blend into the background. I felt like airlight, unbothered, invisible in the best way. But when I landed back in Korea after that trip, something inside me tightened. It was subtle, like a string being pulled. I didn't even understand it then. I brushed it off, told myself I was just tired, that I needed rest, that I missed home, and it made me sensitive. But as I walked through the airport, I noticed it, the shift in energy, the way the air felt heavier, the way my footsteps suddenly felt monitored, even if no one said a word. There were cameras, flashes, voices calling my name from far away, people rushing toward me like waves hitting the shore. And even though the love was real and pure, there was a part of me that felt like the boy inside me had to retreat again, hide behind the persona, behind V, the idol, the public figure, the version of me that people recognize but don't really know. That duality, it became harder to balance over time. I know people sometimes say, you chose this life. You wanted this. You should be grateful. And they're not wrong. I am grateful. Every day, I wake up thankful for the people who support me, the opportunities I've had, the memories I've made, the love that surrounds me. Fame has given me more blessings than I can count. But fame also comes with weight, and that weight sits differently depending on where you are. In Korea, the weight feels heavier. It's the place where my career exploded, where expectations stacked higher and higher until they felt like walls around me. It's where every move I made became a headline, where silence could be misread, where a single expression could be interpreted in 10 different ways. It's where people loved me intensely, but also where every version of me was dissected, labeled, claimed. Abroad, I could breathe. In Korea, I had to perform even when I wasn't on stage. I think the moment I realized the difference most clearly was one night when I returned to Seoul after a long solo trip. It was late, almost midnight. I walked out of the airport hoping the dark would shield me a little. But even then, there were people waiting. People who had tracked the flight, who had been standing there in the cold, holding cameras and phones, ready to catch every second of my arrival. I felt guilty they waited because they loved me. But I also felt overwhelmed. And that feeling only grew stronger with time. I remember sitting in the car that night, looking out the window as the city passed by. Seoul's lights were beautiful neon signs, headlights, reflections bouncing off the river. But something felt disconnected, like the city didn't recognize me anymore, or maybe I didn't recognize it. The places that once made me feel grounded now felt distant, like memories instead of home. I pressed my forehead against the cold window and asked myself quietly, why do I feel like a stranger in the place where I grew up? At first, I blamed myself. I thought maybe I was burnt out. Maybe I needed rest, not distance. Maybe I was just tired of the noise, the pressure, the expectations. Maybe I was being dramatic. But then the feeling didn't fade. It deepened. It followed me. It showed up when I walked into restaurants and people went silent. When I sat in cafes and felt eyes on me, even before I ordered. When I visited simple places, parks, bookstores, markets, and felt the shift in the air as soon as someone recognized me. Fame is strange like that. It doesn't just change how others see you, it changes how you see spaces. Even the safest places can start to feel like stages without warning. And it wasn't just the public spaces, it was the industry too. The pressure to always be perfect, to always smile, to always say the right thing, to always look the right way, to always represent something bigger than yourself. It made me grateful but also cautious, careful, quiet. It made me shrink sometimes. Then there were the people online, millions of them, who loved me fiercely, but whose voices could sometimes be overwhelming. Their expectations, their theories, their interpretations of my actions, they built a narrative around me that didn't always match who I was inside. Sometimes I felt like I was being written into a story I didn't fully control. But here's the part people don't expect. The more time I spent abroad, the more Korea began to feel unfamiliar. But the more I appreciated it too. The distance created clarity. The contrast made me understand things I didn't understand before. When I walked in cities abroad, Paris, New York, Tokyo, London, I felt freedom. When I came back to Korea, I felt responsibility. And both are important. Both are meaningful. But feeling both at the same time can be confusing. I started noticing small things. The pace of life in Korea felt faster than before, even though it was the same streets I walked as a trainee. The culture felt sharper, more opinionated, more immediate. People's reactions were quicker, their expectations more intense. I didn't fit in the same way I used to, not because Korea had rejected me, but because I had grown into someone who no longer fit the same mold. As the world expanded for me, the definition of home expanded too. And that's when I realized something important. Sometimes home isn't just a place, it's also a time in your life. And when that time passes, the place changes with it. Home for me used to be the version of Korea I knew as a boy. But that boy grew up, he traveled, he learned, he changed. And when he came back, he wasn't the same. The house was still there, but he wasn't the same person walking through the door. And that's why Korea feels different now. But this is just the beginning of the story. Because the real turning point, the moment everything truly shifted, didn't happen in Korea. It happened somewhere else. Somewhere far away, where I found a version of myself I thought I had lost. And that's what I want to tell you next. There was a moment, one single moment that changed everything for me. A moment that didn't take place in Korea or on a stage or during a performance. It happened somewhere quiet, somewhere ordinary, somewhere no one expected. And ironically, it was in that quiet place, far from home, that I finally understood why home felt so different when I returned to it. I remember it clearly. I was in a cafe in Paris, not a fancy one, not the kind you see on postcards. It was small, old, slightly creaky, with wooden chairs that had scratches on them and windows fogged from the cold outside. The kind of place where time feels slower, where people speak softly, where no one cares how you look or who you are. I was alone. I didn't have a manager with me that day, no staff, no cameras, just me, my coat, and a cup of coffee that warmed my hands. As I sat there, watching people walk by outside, something inside me loosened like a knot. I didn't know I had been carrying finally untied itself. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't performing. I wasn't planning what I should say or analyzing what expression I should have or worrying whether someone was watching. I was invisible, peacefully, beautifully invisible. And in that invisibility, I found myself again. A couple sat across the room from me. They laughed loudly, carelessly. Their laughter wasn't polite or restrained. It was messy, full, real. A little dog barked outside the window. A waiter dropped a tray and left at himself. The barista spilled milk and didn't apologize for more than a second. It was all so human, imperfect, warm, alive. And as I watched all of this, I realized how much I missed being part of moments like that. Moments where life didn't feel like a performance. Moments where I didn't have to calculate my existence. I remember breathing in and feeling something break gently inside my chest. Not in a painful way, more like a realization. This is what it feels like to live, I thought. This is what it feels like to be just a person. And then the second realization hit me even harder. I couldn't feel this way in Korea anymore, not in the same way, not with the same softness. I loved Korea, but Korea didn't allow me to disappear. I finished my coffee and walked outside. The cold air hit my face like a reminder that I was human, like a reset button. I walked down the street with my hands in my pockets, passing strangers who didn't even glance my way. If they did look, it was just for a second, not out of recognition but curiosity, like you might look at anyone passing by. I wasn't Taehyung, I wasn't V, I was just another traveler in a big city. And I felt so free, my eyes almost watered. People often ask why I seem more relaxed when I'm abroad, why I smile differently, why my shoulders look softer. It's not because I love other countries more. It's because in those places I get to experience life without the weight of being watched, without the pressure of being perfect, without the constant awareness of eyes and opinions. But as beautiful as that freedom was, it also made something else very clear to me. The more I felt like myself abroad, the more foreign Korea felt when I returned. I came back from that trip, and the moment I landed, the energy shifted again. The airport was crowded. Phones went up immediately. People rushed forward. Security tightened around me. My name echoed from different directions like it belonged to everyone except me. I remember smiling politely, bowing, waving, saying thank you as always. But inside, a small part of me sank. That peaceful feeling I had in Paris vanished the second I stepped back into the spotlight. I got into the car, and as we drove through Seoul, the city lights felt brighter than before, almost blinding. Everything felt loud, even the silence. And the gap between the Taehyung who sat quietly in that Paris cafe and the Taehyung who was now back in the car felt huge. I wasn't sure which version was the real me. The confused one, the tired one, the performing one, the peaceful one. That's when the deeper conflict began. I started asking myself questions I had never asked before, questions that scared me. Where is my home now? Why do I feel more myself in places that aren't mine? Why does the place I grew up feel like a stage I can't step off of? And more importantly, what changed inside me? These questions followed me everywhere. During performances, during breaks, during quiet nights in my room, even during moments of joy, there was a small part of me wondering when the feeling of home had shifted into something unfamiliar. And that's when I realized something painfully honest. Sometimes you can love a place deeply and still feel lost in it. It's not betrayal, it's not ingratitude, it's not abandonment, it's growth. As I traveled more, lived more, saw more, and experienced more, my heart changed. My perspective changed. My definition of home changed. Korea didn't become worse. It just didn't match the version of me I was becoming, at least not fully, not in the same way it used to. But I didn't want to admit that at first. I felt guilty even thinking it. Guilty for feeling distant from my own country. Guilty for feeling freer elsewhere. Guilty for wanting space. Guilty for wanting to exist without carrying the weight of millions of eyes. Guilty for missing a kind of anonymity that most people take for granted. It took me years to realize that wanting to breathe doesn't mean you're ungrateful. Wanting space doesn't mean you want to live forever. And feeling disconnected doesn't mean you don't love where you came from. I wish someone had told me that earlier. Because for a long time, I thought something was wrong with me. I thought, why can't I handle this? Why do I feel suffocated sometimes? Why do I crave silence and invisibility when so many people dream of being noticed? The truth is simple. Humans aren't designed to be watched constantly. Even the strongest hearts need a place to rest, a place where no one knows your name, a place where you can sit with a cup of coffee and breathe without thinking, a place where you can just exist. For me, that place used to be Korea. Then slowly, quietly, it became somewhere else. But this story isn't just about losing a sense of home, it's about finding a new one. And that part, that journey, is much more emotional than I expected. Because the moment I discovered where home had moved to, everything in my life shifted. And that's what I want to share next. If you're still with me, thank you. Let's keep going. When I look back now, it almost feels like my heart started searching for a new kind of home without telling me. Not to replace Korea, not to forget it, but to find a space where I could breathe without feeling split into two people. A space where Taehyung and V didn't have to fight to coexist. A space where I didn't have to switch roles or read the room before I spoke. A space where my thoughts could be simple again. I didn't know where that space was at first. I didn't go out looking for it. I wasn't even aware that I needed it. But life has a funny way of guiding you without your permission, pushing you into places you didn't expect, introducing you to versions of yourself you didn't know you still had. The shift began during a long period when I was overseas for work. The schedule was demanding, but the moments in between, the ones no one saw, were the moments that changed me. Even small, ordinary things felt like escape routes. Waking up without noise, walking down a street without worrying about cameras, sitting on a bench and watching people pass by without feeling like I had to hide. One night, in particular, stays with me. I was in New York, staying in a rented apartment, nothing fancy, just a place with windows that overlooked the city lights. The room was dim. I was tired physically and emotionally. I laid down on the floor, not even on the bed, just the floor, and stared at the ceiling. I listened to the distant traffic, the muffled sounds of strangers living their lives, and something inside me softened. I realized I didn't feel watched, not even a little. I didn't feel pressured, I didn't feel observed, judged, categorized, interpreted, misunderstood. I felt safe. Not in a dramatic way, but in a quiet, almost invisible way. A kind of safety that comes from not having to be someone, just being a human breathing in a room. And that was the moment I felt it for the first time. This feels like home. Not because of the city, not because of the apartment, but because I felt like myself, fully, gently, honestly myself. That moment changed everything. From then on, every time I traveled abroad, pieces of that feeling came back to me. And every time I returned to Korea, it felt further away. But I didn't want to admit it. Not to myself, not to anyone. Because Korea is where I was born, where I learned everything, where I met the people who shaped me, where my dreams took form, where my brothers stood by my side, where fans lifted me higher than I ever imagined. Korea wasn't just a place. It was my foundation, my identity, my history. So, how could I admit, even silently, that I didn't always feel at home in the place that gave me everything? The guilt was heavier than the truth. I kept telling myself it was just stress, just exhaustion, just a phase. I kept saying, "It's fine, you're fine, everything is fine." I kept trying to squeeze myself back into the shape that fit my old life, even though I had grown past it. It felt like wearing clothes I had outgrown, familiar but too tight, meaningful but restricting. The public didn't help, not because they were doing something wrong, but because love in Korea can be intense, overwhelming, all consuming. People know everything, track everything, analyze everything. If I wasn't seen for a few days, people worried. If I looked tired, people theorized. If I smiled differently, people created stories. Even the smallest things could become big narratives. I understood their intentions. I understood their love. But sometimes love can feel like pressure, even when it's meant to protect you. There were days I wished I could walk outside without thinking about how I looked. Days I wished I could go to a restaurant and sit quietly without people whispering. Days I wished I could exist without feeling like a character in a script I didn't write. That's when it became clear to me, home is not just where you're from, home is where you can breathe. And breathing had become hard in Korea, not because Korea changed into something bad, but because my life inside Korea no longer matched the person I was becoming. But the story doesn't end with running away. It doesn't end with choosing one place over another. It doesn't end with abandoning or replacing anything. Because even as Korea felt increasingly foreign, there was another force pulling me back. The people I loved, the memories I cherished, the roots I couldn't cut even if I tried. There were nights I sat alone abroad, feeling peaceful, but also feeling a deep ache, a longing that only Korea could fill. I miss Korean food, Korean conversations, Korean humor, Korean warmth. I missed the rhythm of the language, the way older people spoke with familiarity, the sound of the countryside at dawn. I missed my home even while feeling distant from it. And that contradiction was the hardest to understand. How could I miss a place that didn't feel like home? How could I crave a country that made me feel suffocated sometimes? How could I love something and feel disconnected from it at the same time? The truth is, distance can create clarity. Being away made me realize I didn't want to choose between freedom abroad and responsibility in Korea. I didn't want to abandon one to save the other. I didn't want to lose myself in either place. I wanted balance. I wanted peace. I wanted wholeness. And for the first time in my life, I allowed myself to believe I deserved that. So I started thinking deeply about what home really means. Not the dictionary definition, not the expectation, not the childhood memory, but the emotional truth. Home is the place where your heart returns without hesitation. Home is the place where you feel safe being your full self. Home is the place where love doesn't suffocate but supports. Home is the place where you can grow without fear. Home is the place where your soul feels understood even when the world doesn't. And Korea, despite everything, still held those pieces for me. But they were buried under layers of pressure, noise, expectation, and responsibility. I needed to peel back those layers to rediscover the Korea that felt like home. That journey, the journey of reconnecting with the place I came from, was the hardest part of all and the most meaningful. Because at some point, I realized that feeling lost wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning. And that's where the real transformation began. The transformation that made me understand myself, my country, and the meaning of home in a way I never had before. Taehyung sat back in his chair, his fingers lightly tapping the armrest as if keeping rhythm with a song only he could hear. There was something peaceful in the way he moved, slow, calm, yet undeniably expressive. After taking a quiet breath, he continued sharing the memories that had shaped the way Korea felt to him now. His eyes softened as he spoke, almost as if he were looking at a version of himself he hadn't seen in years. He explained that returning to Korea after time abroad always brought a strange mix of comfort and unfamiliarity. There were days when the city felt like a warm embrace, a place he understood instantly without words. But there were also days when it felt like each street carried traces of the past memories he had outgrown or moments that no longer felt like they belonged to him. He said that was the funny thing about home. Sometimes it welcomed you like you never left, and sometimes it reminded you of how much you've changed. Taehyung admitted that change was never something he handled easily, not because he feared it, but because he felt things deeply. Every shift, every new chapter, every goodbye, he carried them like notes in a song that refused to fade. And because of that, returning to Korea occasionally felt like stepping onto a stage where every sound, every face, every corner had a meaning. It could be overwhelming, even if the world saw him as someone strong, confident, and endlessly composed. There was a moment, he said softly, when I walked into a cafe I used to visit a lot. It wasn't anything special, just a small place where I'd get the same drink every time. But something felt different. He paused, thinking. The furniture moved, new staff, new music playing, even the smell wasn't the same. And it hit me. Sometimes a place changes before you're ready to. He laughed gently at himself, as if realizing how sentimental it sounded, but he didn't shy away from it. If anything, he leaned into it. He shared how fame amplified that feeling. When the world watched him, expected things from him, loved him, and sometimes judged him, Korea slowly shifted from a private comfort to a public arena, The streets that used to feel like home began to feel like a spotlight. He said it wasn't anyone's fault, it was just part of the life he chose. But it made him more aware of his surroundings, more cautious, more selective about where he placed his heart. Still, Taehyung emphasized that he never resented it. Instead, he learned to cherish the rare moments when Korea felt like it used to: quiet mornings, late night walks, simple meals, and the company of people who saw him as Kim Taehyung, not the global figure fans know. Those moments reminded him that home wasn't a place that stayed the same. Home was a feeling he had to find again and again, in small details that often went unnoticed. As he continued, Taehyung revealed that reconnecting with Korea required patience. Patience with himself, patience with the changes, and patience with the people who loved him in their own ways. He learned to appreciate new experiences instead of comparing them to old ones. He learned to see beauty in how things evolved. And he learned that sometimes Korea felt different not because the country changed, but because he did. He spoke about friendships that had shifted over time, people drifting in and out of his life, and how those transitions subtly redefined what home meant. Some friends grew distant, others became closer, and some stayed the same through everything.